Hey everyone, before we dive in, I wanted to share something exciting. You can now send us a text message directly from your favorite audio platform. Yes. So whether you've got a question, want to give us feedback, or just want to share your thoughts on the show, I'd love to hear from you. Look in the show notes at the very start and you will see the phrase send us a text. Click that link, send us your message, and that's it. We can't wait to read them. Now, let's jump in with this episode.
We had some big moments like as a team. We had some really bad losses. And I remember going back home after one of them and I was crying to my dad and I was like, I don't think I can do this. Like, I don't think we're gonna this is the team. We're not gonna get much better than what we have. Like we had all the right pieces.
Today on the show, I'm talking with retired basketball player from Rhode Island College and the current head coach for women's basketball at Post University. Courtney Burns is up next. Welcome back to the Fifth Quarter Podcast. I'm your host, Sandy Adams, and this is where we dive deep into the world of sports, talking with retired athletes, current athletes, and everyone that makes the sports world great. A quick reminder, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the show. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, Audible, YouTube, and wherever you listen to podcasts. And hey, if you love what you hear, take a screenshot of your favorite episode and share it on Instagram stories. Tag us at 5THQRT podcast so more folks can discover these stories. Now grab your iced tea or your coffee, get ready to be motivated and inspired because this is where the real stories are told. Today's guest, she's a proven leader with a track record of building winners on the court and in the locker room. From making history as a player at Rhode Island College to dominating as a head coach at Mitchell and now Post University, Coach Courtney Burns has built programs rooted in discipline, belief, and results. Her journey from athlete to architect of teams is one marked by resilience, purpose, and a clear vision of what greatness really takes. I couldn't be more excited to welcome to the show Coach Courtney Burns. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
I am great. For those out there that maybe don't know where Post University is, where is it? Where are you right now?
So we're located in Waterbury, Connecticut, not too far from the New York border.
Okay, yeah, I'm familiar. I'm familiar with that area. So you're currently the head coach at Post University. You actually were just you just got that job 2 years ago this month, correct?
Yeah, this is the 2-year anniversary this month, actually. Yeah, I started July 1. So
So looking back in these past 2 years, what do you think has stood out the most about your tenure there since you were announced as head coach?
yeah, so I think, the coach before me had done a great job. So, had the program in good hands. And, I think we've changed the style of play a little bit since we've been here, just a more kind of team focused style where getting up and down, playing at a good pace, and, a lot of versatile players that have the ability to kind of go inside, outside. And, I
Right.
think we've now recruited some players that really fit that style and fit that system. And so, I think we're, at a point where, people like to watch us, we're fun to watch. And, I think recruits are kind of catching on, the local community. We're starting to run some camps and clinics. And, I think
Mhm.
Post is a great university. And just to get our name out there, get our brand out there, and, show some women that are doing some big things in the sport world. I just like to kind of build that community environment.
I think that I could probably talk to you for hours about this, but, especially in the past 2 years, with the evolution of women's basketball just coming into more of the mainstream media and everybody kind of embracing that, and just women's sports in general, I think it's a fascinating time to be a woman and to be an athlete as a female. Has it been easier to recruit or harder to recruit?
I think it depends kind of on where you look at it. I mean, I think the transfer portal has really changed things.
It has.
I think we're getting a lot more, like you said, a lot more publicity, and I think our game is getting a lot more recognition, which, I love. But I think it's probably the hardest ever now for high school athletes and trying
I
to get
agree.
recruited and, find the right spot. We had a couple kids up today for a visit, and they actually asked that question. Are you recruiting freshmen or are you only recruiting transfers? We feel like a lot of scholarship level
Yeah.
coaches are, just looking at transfers at this point. So I think it's really kind of about finding your niche. And I think when we were at Mitchell College, myself and my staff, we found our niche of, players that
Right.
really fit well and it's the right place for them. I think we found our niche here at Post as well. And, so I don't think recruiting anywhere is easy. I think you're going to find your hurdles wherever you go.
Yeah.
I think you're seeing, though, with the evolution of women's basketball, a lot more players starting to train at an earlier age. I think the skill set is, really come a long way. And even just like the last 5 years,
Right.
just a lot more dedication to that craft, which I think is going to only elevate the game. I think it's going to make the Division 1 level more competitive and make our level more competitive, the Division 3 level. So, I think a little bit of both. There's some easier tracks to it, but I think everywhere you go, you kind of find those hurdles in recruiting. And it's about, finding the right players that are the right
Right.
fit for the culture and the program.
You hit on something about finding the right fit. And I think no matter who you are out there, if you're just a regular everyday person trying to get a job, or you're an athlete looking for a new team or looking for what college to go to, I think that's very important to go for where you fit in best and not just who's the shiniest or who has the best offer. Here in Memphis, we've really discovered how hard the transfer portal can, tear everything up, and especially in the men's basketball. But it's just a whole new world out there. But we're here to talk about you today, and as I said, I could probably talk to you for hours about that. Where did you grow up at?
So I actually grew up in Rockland, Mass. It's about 20 minutes south of Boston.
Yeah.
Really small town, but big basketball town. So kind of grew up in it, and a lot of blue collar people that work hard, and I think it kind of gave me a foundation of the way I coach and things like that. Just a really good
Right.
community of people.
Right. My sister actually lives in Boston, so I'm very familiar, kind of familiar
Small
with.
world.
I know, right? So when did basketball actually come into your life?
So it's actually funny. So I started at the youth level. There was a lot of different town leagues and travel teams in our area, and I played a bunch of different sports. And my parents were great. Neither of them really played sports, so kind of gave me the option to really do whatever I wanted to. And so I loved basketball. I probably started in first grade. My dad, hardworking guy, came to one of my games and told me I wasn't playing hard enough, and if I didn't play hard, he was gonna pull me. And so got really nervous, and then found my aggressive streak from there. And my mom was great. So my dad had his own business, and my mom did kind of the bookkeeping for that. And so
Right.
she got to take me to all the AAU tournaments, and was basically my college coach will say she's like my agent, which is hilarious as you kind of go through the recruiting process. And
Right.
like I said, we didn't really know much about the recruiting process, or what that kind of looked like, or where we should be or what we should be doing. But our high school had a really long history of success. We won a lot of championships. It was kind of not even an expectation. It was just kind of a given that that's where you
Right.
need to be and what you needed to do. And then we kind of navigated the recruiting process together. But it really started in first grade, and I just had a lot of great people along the way that kind of helped in my journey to take it to the next
Right.
level.
Did you try any other sports, or what about basketball just kind of grabbed you?
Yeah, I did a lot. So when I was younger, I did karate, and then when I got into high school, softball, basketball, and volleyball. So I played three
Right.
sports throughout there. And I wish, looking back on it as a coach now, I wish I could have done a little bit more training on the side from a basketball standpoint, and didn't really know what I should be doing or how to do
Yeah.
it. And then when I got to the college level, was able to kind of learn that, and wish I was able to do that at a little bit of a younger age. But I just always liked the pace of basketball.
Right.
I liked the pressure of it. I liked, the ins and outs, and the good times and the bad times. I learned a lot. I grew a lot. And, like I said, basketball was probably the premier sport in our town.
Right.
So you grew
Right.
up learning from the older kids,
Right.
going to the
Right.
high school camps and things like that. And, you wanted to wear that jersey one day and be a Bulldog. So, it was always kind of just like ingrained in our town. For athletes, that was a big sport for women.
I've had a lot of women basketball players on here, and the ones that have come from smaller areas, smaller towns, I was surprised, and they were too, about how they didn't train as much when they were in high school. That they get to college and suddenly like they're having to lift weights and all this other stuff, which had not been part of their high school programs. And I was kind of shocked about that. But I see it here with even the boys, not necessarily all the high school teams. I think they're starting to weightlift a little bit and
Yep.
starting to train off. But yeah, it's fascinating about the development of athletes, especially girls, and kind of how that trajectory goes. So let's talk about your high school. So you talked about, you said that the recruiting was, your parents didn't necessarily know all that, but that town was really, kept putting out really great basketball players. Who were you being recruited by, and how did that feel to you to get that attention on you?
Sure. So, my freshman year, I was very fortunate. It ended up a bad situation turned good. I was actually cut from the varsity team my freshman year just because my defense wasn't great. And
Right.
a guy at my church, he actually ran his own strength and conditioning. So he asked me to sign up for his summer program and got involved in that and loved it and was able to get that strength training side of things
Yeah.
outside of the basketball piece, which was really huge. And he had been a wrestler in college, so he kind of helped me through the process a little bit as well. And then AAU in our area, we didn't know much about the teams, but my high school coach had a connection to a really good guy out in Duxbury, and tried to get me involved in that. And I actually broke my leg skiing. So I was out for the summer. So I was pretty late in the process. I ended up staying with that team. The team had a lot of players that, were there for kind of like the joy of it, weren't really
Right.
looking to go to the college level. And we'd say we wouldn't change that experience because we really loved it and met some great people, some great friends that I still talk to today. But we just didn't know. And so we were going to these AAU tournaments kind of blindly and
Yeah.
just saying, oh, coaches are going to see us. And,
Right.
then my mom, as my college coach calls it, as my agent, started sending out emails and trying to reach out to coaches and send some film and things along those lines, which now thinking back on it, I probably should have done that. It'd be a more mature approach. But, from a coaching standpoint, it kind of gives me a little bit of a different perspective with players in the recruiting process, just having kind of
Sure.
gone through it myself.
Sure.
But yeah, I thought that coach was really great. He did a nice job. I look at it now, he was very more like a college coach versus,
Hmm.
just like, let's roll the ball out and play. And so, I didn't know it at the time, but looking back at it now, it was a really good experience and helped prepare me for the college level. And no, I always say everything for a reason. My college coach saw me in a back gym somewhere and called me, and we had no idea where Rhode Island College was, what it was,
Right.
and he was awesome. And he really just sold me on an experience there. And being a piece of the puzzle. It was his second year. It was going to be his second recruiting class. He had recruited his
Right.
first class that were kind of the game changers, to change the culture, change the program. And they were looking for another piece of that puzzle. And he kind of sold me on that role. And I was recruited by a lot of Division III schools. Had a couple Division II and Division I like walk-on opportunities.
Hmm.
And, I just, something about that felt like the right fit for me. And I'm glad I did because it's been a big part of, where I am today, having gone through that
Right.
experience.
I hear so many stories about how the college coaches found the player in just some off the wall reason, they were not there to even look at somebody else. And,
Yeah.
and I talk a lot about, just people in general, as much as athletes, but how use every opportunity, regardless of what you think is going to happen or who's there. You never know who's going to see you or who can refer you to another coach or something like that, Um, the transition from high school to college, what in terms of playing basketball, was there a big learning curve once you got to college?
Yeah. Especially on the defensive side,
Yeah.
coming in there, I was an undersized post. Everyone thinks I was a guard. And so I was in there as kind of like a four spot. And so a little bit undersized and had to kind of defend some of the players on the perimeter and, really struggled. And then offensively, traveled quite a bit. It was kind of like a running joke. So, you get recruited and, they tell you all these things of, where they see you, where they see you fit. But, sometimes it takes a little time to, get into that groove and find that role. So freshman year, that first semester, was rough. And, I think I really, worked at it, tried to work as much outside of practice with our coaches. They were awesome,
Right.
had a lot of help in that regard. And, just the things that I needed to do to get on the floor. Like my coaches were very transparent, which I really liked of, where I stood. And, there were times that, I remember mid semester had a breakout game. I think I scored like 15 and I was like, all right, I'm good. I solidified the spot. And then next game I didn't play at all. And like, what's going on? And he's like, well, you can't defend the team that we're playing. And so, it didn't happen all at once in that first year, but, got a lot of minutes, ended up, carving out a pretty good role for myself. But, I had to be limited in terms of, what I could provide them on the floor. And I knew
Right.
defensively was something that I was really going to have to improve on. It was just a different speed, a different level. I was strong enough to be there, but, laterally I wasn't quick enough. And so, after that freshman year, my coach probably gave the best advice, your biggest growth is the development between your freshman year and your sophomore year, and what does that
Right.
summer look like for you, and put together a really good plan. And the same coach that trained me through high school, I went back and I said, hey, this is what my coach said, this is what we need to do. And he put a plan together for me, and moving forward, he could never take me off the floor and guarded the best players. So it was
So let's give him a shout out. What's his
yeah.
name?
Marcus Riley. So he's
Okay.
actually he was there at Rhode Island College. He had took over the year before I got in there. And then like I said, I was his second recruiting class. And he left after my junior year, going into senior year. He took an assistant job at the University of Rhode Island. And then he's
Right.
been at Bryant University and now is the assistant coach at Stonehill College. So
Okay. That freshman year, when so you enter college, had you already had some kind of thought about what you were going to do after college?
So I had gone in to be a teacher actually. So I went for secondary education for mathematics. And that's what I plan on doing, and plan on going back to Rockland or somewhere in the
Right.
area and coaching high school basketball there. And then looked at, potentially joining a partnership and working with the trainer at the gym that had trained me through
Right.
high school and college. And that was kind of always the goal. And I ended up training with our men's basketball assistant coach a couple times, and we were sitting there at a training session getting ready for the following season. And we were talking about the loss at the end of my sophomore year, and it's like, ah, man. And he's like, no, you'll be back, and you'll get back, and you'll be on the sidelines one day when you're done. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, you're gonna be a coach, right? And I was like, I don't know, I never really like thought about it that way. And
Yeah.
then was able to meet with my coach and going into senior year. And yeah, just kind of went from there. But coming from that small town, you never realized that like college coaching could be a
Yeah.
full-time job. And
Right.
so, we just didn't know. My family didn't know. I didn't know. And, obviously you're getting recruited, but you just don't kind of think about it in that capacity. And, I was very fortunate. Marcus put me in a lot of leadership roles. Like I was in charge of strength and conditioning for our team.
Right.
I didn't usually like talking in public. So a lot of times he surprised me and just threw me in there, and I had to, talk. And didn't like him at the time doing that, but can definitely see it took me out of my shell. But yeah, I mean, it was just that was never on my radar until that random
Right.
conversation, and then it's kind of been history from there. I mean, right when I graduated, even before I graduated, I got into coaching, and it's been kind of that way ever since.
Well, it's almost like you were in an internship type program while you were being a player. I think it's great. Does that change how you handle the girls coming into your team about what's going to happen after graduation? Real talk. I want to help more people like you show up online with confidence, starting with your LinkedIn profile. If your profile still reads like a job history instead of a reflection of who you are now, we need to fix that. I offer a LinkedIn makeover service where I rewrite your headline, your about section, and your experience to tell your story in a way that gets noticed, that showcases your expertise. It's personal, it's real, and it's all about helping you stand out for the right reasons. Book your makeover at sandy-adams.com/LinkedIn, and let's get your profile working for you.
Yeah, I mean, we try to put them in, like I said, there's a lot of great like leadership activities, leader books and seminars and, things along those lines. And I think it's awesome and so much great information. But for myself, I feel like the most I've learned about leadership has been kind of being put in those situations
Right,
and working through situations like in real life and in real time. And so, we actually don't pick captains for our team. Everybody on our team has a leadership role, and some is really
right,
big and some are a little bit small, but kind of emphasize the importance that like every role is important, and you
right,
got to be a leader in your own way, and that's going to look different for everybody. And so it's helped us really kind of develop our players, just in the way in which I kind of went through my college experience, and
right.
able to kind of put our players in different situations and prepare them. And I think Post does a great job like with our internship opportunities of allowing our players to get real life experience
Yeah,
in their chosen fields. And I think our players usually turn out pretty well because they're able to use the things they learned in basketball, not from a
sure.
skill set standpoint, but from a leadership standpoint. And, they tend to stand out. I mean, this year we had 3 players who graduated. Two of them already had jobs before they even, went into graduation, and one of them's trying to go overseas, so she's kind of putting it on hold. And then,
Right.
we had 6 years at Mitchell College, and all those players have come up and seen a game at Post, and my whole staff with me who was at Mitchell was here with me at Post, so that's
Oh,
been
that makes me
super
like
nice.
that.
Yeah,
That
and
gets me emotional.
yeah, and then, those guys just reaching out and hearing the success they're having. And it's like, there are days that you're like, oh, this is tough. We're having a
Yeah.
tough
Yeah.
day. And
Yeah.
you go through, but like you see kind of all that come around full circle. And, we have at Mitchell, a lot of our players were first generation college graduates. And so they
Yeah.
crossed the stage, which was risky sometimes at some points. And now to see them, like one of our players, she actually failed out of a college her freshman year, and we took a chance on her. I was able to talk with admissions and just kind
Right.
of say, hey, this is what we're going to do. This is the academic plan we're going to be on. She needs a little bit more hands-on. This is where we're going to be. Just trust me. And she probably wasn't going to be able to get in anywhere. And the
Sure.
admissions, pulled a string, and they said, okay, we're going to do that. And after her fall semester, she had a 4.0, and she graduated like I think with a 3.95, and then came to Post, got her grad degree and utilized her COVID year, and now is like working her way up in enterprise. And to hear the success, and she can look back at, well, these scenarios in
Yeah.
basketball relate to the workforce. And it's like, we've won a lot of championships, we've won a lot of games, but like those are the things for me that's like, all right, we're winning like
Right.
outside of here.
Right.
So,
There's so many skill sets other than just the basketball skills. There's working with, teams, learning how to work as a unit, the discipline involved in it, the dedication and the consistency that I think a lot of individuals who may not have played team sports may not have those skill sets or have to somehow figure out how to learn them on the fly. So I definitely see. Do you have a lot of players coming in that have WNBA or overseas dreams?
a lot of, I mean, I think it's hard at our level
Hmm.
to jump from like the Division 2 level to the
Right,
WNBA. Not
right,
that it's impossible, but
right,
we
right.
do get a lot that want to play professionally, and I think it's more of kind of that overseas dream.
Sure.
And we've had players at all levels. Like we had players at Mitchell that went over and played overseas. We've had players at Post now that have gone over and played
Right,
overseas. We have a couple kids. I coached AAU for 6 years, and actually one of the young ladies I trained and coached in AAU has graduated now. She played Division 1 basketball for 4 years, and she's coming in today, and we'll train. And she leaves
right,
in August to go overseas. So there's so many options, and we always thought if you want to do it, we have some connections, and it's not easy
right. Yeah,
per se, but if you get the opportunity, you can only play basketball for so long, so kind
sure.
of take advantage of it.
One thing that I've kind of, because you're going to be my 72nd interview. And one thing that I've kind of noticed over the past 2 years of doing these conversations is that the women tend to go into their college years in whatever, mostly basketball, but they tend to go into their college years with a plan that doesn't include pro sports.
Hmm.
The men tend to go into their college career thinking pro or nothing. Very few have, they have to get, they have to declare a major and things like that. But then there's a lot of them that don't even finish because they got a chance to play overseas. But it's interesting that the mindset of the woman versus the male athlete is different. I think some of that plays to there's not a lot of opportunities for pro sports after college for women versus men. But it is an interesting thing. It's almost like pro ball is like your backup plan.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Yeah. Yeah. So for you, let's go back to your college career. You already had, like, it was already kind of planned out for you. So when you graduated, you said you already had a job?
So I did. So the to get your teaching certificate at Rhode Island College, you had to go for an extra year. So I did my
Right.
4 years of playing, and then they added a coaching minor. So I picked that up,
Oh,
and then was finishing my undergrad. And my coach from college, I was actually going to go do an internship with him at the University of Rhode Island. And then there was an opening at Johnson and Wales University, which is
mhm.
probably 10 minutes from the Rhode Island College campus, and they were looking for a part-time assistant. And so had a meeting and an interview with the coach that was there, and he was kind of trying to do the same thing that we did at Rhode Island College, change the culture of the program,
Right.
compete for the school's first ever championship. And so he liked my experience of having gone through a player. And so I actually got a part-time job as the assistant at Johnson and Wales while I was finishing my undergrad. So it kind of started there. And, I had the dreams of kind of going overseas as well and wanted to finish my degree first and,
Right.
had some things lined up. And I felt like I'd kind of already got my foot in the door with coaching. And he was awesome about like introducing me to people and kind of getting my career started. And then I got a full-time job offer, which my college coach actually helped me with as well, right as I graduated. And I was the youngest assistant in Division 2. And so it was too good of an opportunity to pass up. So it was just kind of, this is the career I want to go. So kind of gave up that
Right.
dream of overseas. So kind of proves to your point you were saying earlier.
Yeah. Was there ever a point in college where, or at any point as a player, where you felt like, or you said to yourself, I don't know if this is what I was meant to do?
In terms of playing or like
Yes.
coaching?
Yeah. In terms of playing
Yeah, there was some hard stuff. I mean, I tore my ACL my sophomore year, like right as I was kind of hitting stride. And
of college or high school?
college, yeah, my
Oh,
sophomore year, right before going into the playoffs, I contact injury tore my ACL, and it was like the most devastating thing to
yeah.
me. And I ended up rehabbing it a little bit and came back and played on it in the playoffs, and then had the surgery after the season was over. And the rehab just took a while, and there was like some setbacks on it, and I
Yeah.
had to go back in. They had to scrape some scar tissue out and things along those lines, and it was kind of like, am I ever going to get back to where I was? And I'd really worked so hard from that freshman year to
Yeah.
sophomore year and solidified that starting spot and, defending the best player on the floor. And, we were on track to win a championship. And I was like, they're going to win it and I'm not even gonna be able to play.
Yeah.
And then, that next year, as Marcus should, he was recruiting players to come in and, elevate us. And I was at everything. I was going to the summer leagues and everything. And I was watching everybody get better. And I'm like, I can't even do anything right now. Like,
Right.
and there was a point that I thought that I might lose my spot. And just because, everyone else was working and I couldn't. And so,
Right.
there were some, struggles there. And then my senior year, we graduated a lot. And then Marcus left and took that assistant job. And we had a new coach coming in, and she was put in a really difficult situation of, you're coming off of a team that won
Yeah.
the school's first championship. We hosted the NCAA tournament. And we just had a lot of players that summer. They didn't hire her till the end of the summer. So it was kind of
Yeah.
me keeping track of everybody, making sure they were doing workouts. And there were some that weren't. And I was like, well, don't be surprised when you don't play come fall. And they're like, oh no, I get it. I'm like, well, I'm just letting you know, like you got to put your work in.
Right.
So, that was a tough year for me, just from where we were to, that transition year. But I don't know if I ever would say like, I didn't think I felt like I should be there, but like there were times it was like, is this worth it? Or am I going
Right.
to be at the level which we want? And, senior year didn't, you want it to go as well as the seniors before where you win the whole thing. And,
Yeah.
it was kind of like, they all said when we lost, like, well, this won't be your last time on the sideline. So apparently everybody else knew I was going to coach before I did.
How do you deal with that mindset, when you're having those hard times, especially when it's multiple weeks or months? Like, how do you handle that mentally to keep
Yeah.
yourself motivated?
I have a great support system in place. Like I said, coming from that small town, everybody's a
Yeah.
grinder. So it's like you
Yeah.
gotta kind of like your blue collar. My dad's really good with those talks in those situations. So, finds the right way that kind of knows like what makes me tick of when
Right.
I need that love, when you need the little kind of kick in the butt of like,
Yeah.
you got to get it together. And then Marcus was great throughout through the rehab process. He was more positive than I was, and to be honest. And then, just having that support system and knowing that you have people that you can rely on and talk to when, things aren't going well, and they're going to either motivate you or, they're going to tell you like, sometimes like I'm pretty straightforward. I think if you ask my kids, like I'm very much like very direct, very upfront. Like
Right.
I don't sugarcoat much. And maybe that's because that's the way I like to be talked to too, but no one to give kind of the care and the love there as well. But I think if you can surround yourself with, genuine people, it doesn't have to be
Hmm.
family, it can be just a support system itself. And it kind of helps you get through there because, we say like attitude is something that's a team slogan for us here at Post. And I kind of stole it. Well, not kind of, I did steal it from Jay Wright when I was reading his book over COVID. And it's just like, you can't always control like the situation, but you can
Right.
always control how you react to that situation. And
Exactly.
we tell our kids like that's not just a basketball thing. That's a life thing. Everyone goes through hard times, and learning how to navigate that isn't always easy. But I think if you have the right support system, and that's what we try to provide our kids here, you have to build that trust though. It doesn't happen overnight. Like you
Right.
gotta have people you can build that trust with. So
I think Rick Pitino. had a really great motivational speech that was recorded like this past tournament. Because he's at St. John's, I think, or
Yeah.
yes, about, life happens and you have to learn how to motivate yourself and keep going. He said it a little bit more bluntly, but
I
um,
sent that to our kids. I saw that one too. It's good. It was good.
but it's true. I see. I guess this next generation here. Um, I grew up in a small town too. Like I watched my mom and dad work really hard to get food on the table and things like that. And I think that this generation comes across as a little bit too entitled sometimes, and expect things to just happen, or get really down if something doesn't go their way, and they don't necessarily know how to self motivate themselves, or just kind of take that, move on, have good people around you, and keep going. um, what was the easiest thing about college?
Ooh. The easiest thing about college life was the best. I'd go back to that in a heartbeat. Like I say to our kids, and like, I know you think your day is tough now. I say, I give anything to wake up, go to
I
breakfast, go to
know.
class, go work out, go eat lunch, go work out again, go to
Yeah.
practice. Like those were like some of the best days. And like I said, we had a great culture there. So it was like easy to be there. And really was like a big family. And you always looked back, you always look forward to going back. You know what I mean? So you go
Right.
home for the summer break, and I couldn't get back, fast enough.
Right.
Yeah, and I'm probably the opposite. I definitely, they say you should choose the school for, all the pieces, not your coach.
Right.
I definitely chose it for my coach in the basketball team for sure. But yeah, it was just the experience itself. Like it
I
was,
agree.
I would go back in a heartbeat.
I would definitely agree on that. What do you think you took more pride in as an athlete, being the scorer or being the defender?
I always say that I was probably the worst one in the starting five. My coach might argue with you, but I was kind of like the glue piece. So like we had some really talented players. I was actually the smallest one in the starting lineup, and I played the four spot. But I was always like, after that freshman year, was always guarding the best player, and it was always something for me of, I'm going to hold this player under their average. And I
Right.
think very rarely did players score in double digits. So try to keep them in the singles, and took a lot of pride in just like frustrating people. And then kind of whatever the team needed on that given night, like I'd try to kind of rise. So if we need a rebound, we get a rebound. We need some points, I try to
Right.
get us some points. We need defense, you get defense. And I just took a lot of pride in kind of giving the team whatever they needed in that time. And kind of knew that the post player next to me, she was very talented, all American. We knew what she was going to give us. We had a great shooting guard. We signed a Division II point guard that last year, and had a lot of just really great pieces and good players. And I was just kind of be like, what do we need tonight, to get the win? And I think everybody was kind of on that board of just like a very selfless mentality,
Right.
which
Right.
I think is huge. So
It truly is. So let's talk about, you had a little bit of a stint in semi pros. So you played for the Brockton Lady Thunder team.
yeah.
Why did you decide to do that, and how did it come about?
So I had to finish that last year of my undergrad. So I wasn't
Right.
going to pursue anything overseas because I wanted to finish up my degree first. And I got contacted about trying out. And
Right.
so again, I was a 5'7" post player, which is like pretty undersized, and my coach utilized me really well. So, I didn't think that I'd have a chance at making it, but I got the invite. So I was like, let me give it a try. The tryouts were probably 30 minutes from my mom's house. So
Right.
she took me to the tryouts, and there was a lot of Division I players there that had a lot of experience. There's a lot of Division II players.
Right.
Most of the Division III players that were there were all Americans. And like I said, like I played with some all Americans, but I never made that, kind of cut. And so,
Right.
you just went in there, and kind of those same things that I told you I took pride in at Rhode Island College. It was like, all right, I'm just gonna, I'm gonna stand out. So there were
Hmm.
times where other players were tired, and I would never get tired. Like I put myself in a position where I could play at 100% capacity for 40 minutes and not stop. Like that was also my other like gift. It was like, I'm never gonna get tired, and I know when you are, so I can kind of take advantage of that. But I remember like being at the tryout, and some people were trying to avoid a line, and I just went, and I'm just jumping in. I just jumped into the next one, and so find ways to kind of stick out, and find maybe where you catch somebody's eye. And I was
Hmm.
taking charges and diving on the floor in the tryout. And so I think the whole roster was Division I players, and then two Division III All-Americans, and then me. So it was
That's amazing.
yeah, it was good. It was a different experience. They were kind of like starting up, so we played a few games here and there.
Hmm.
And I only played for that one season because I got into that full-time coaching job
Right.
afterwards. But Yeah, they gave you like a timeline of like when they were gonna call, and so like my whole team was there. We're just sitting there waiting. And we're like,
Oh,
ah, we're like what? When is it? And it was like I think he called me like literally like the call could happen between like 5:30 and 6 p.m. And I think he called me at like 5:59. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like just literally like maybe wait the whole half hour. So it
oh,
was.
that's crazy. So also you did a 4 game tour of Italy with the American International Sports.
Mhm.
Why did you decide to do that, and how did that come about?
So my coach from college was actually going to coach the team. So he
Mm,
invited a few of us to go, and then when he took that Division 1 job, he wasn't allowed to per NCAA rules. So
right,
a lot of the teammates that were going to go because he wasn't coaching decided, not to go. And my mom and I had kind of fundraised, more my mom than me, to be honest, like fundraised to go and
right.
pay the expenses and things along those lines. And I was like, I'm just going to do it. And so
Yeah.
had a great experience, met a lot of players, some from this region, some from outside of the region. And it's amazing how in 10 days you can get really close to people you've never met
Sure,
before.
exactly.
And so like I still talk to some of them. A lot of them still follow like me from a basketball standpoint. Some of them are coaching AAU now, so I get to see them on the road, like when we leave and go to Kentucky in
Yeah.
July. So that's been pretty cool. And then they had told me once I went on that tour that like if you get into college coaching, we'd love to have you back. And so I coached a few of their teams over the last few
Oh,
years. I
that's
actually
pretty cool.
yeah, so it's like, it's amazing. I tell people amazing what opportunities, the game can
Yeah,
kind of open up for
sure.
you in the different areas. Like I've been, like I said, we grew up in a small town. Neither of my parents have been out of the country. And I was like, I've been out of the country like 6 times.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah.
pretty amazing.
And Italy is not a bad place to go at
Oh, it's
all.
awesome. It's
Yeah,
awesome. It's like
I've
my
never.
mom's dream vacation.
And did she go?
No, I'm trying to get her to go maybe with this upcoming. So next year they want me to coach again. So
Right.
I might take some of my post kids with us and go over there. And so I told her she could tag along if she wanted to.
Make her work. Put her to work a little bit.
She
Um,
would. I'd be nervous of what she would say. So
so let's talk about Mitchell. So where is Mitchell? It's Mitchell College, correct?
yeah, yeah. So Mitchell is in New London, Connecticut. So
Okay.
kind of near like Waterford, East Lyme
Hmm.
area. So about an hour apart from Post, hour
Right.
15.
Right. Um, so when you started, you were there how long? 6 years?
Yeah.
That's a long time
Yes.
for a coach. But you guys, you did some incredible things, and I just want to read them to give you. So, if I got my notes here, I don't have my notes. So, no, you won the first conference championship in school
Hmm.
history.
Yep.
You had I've lost all my notes now.
No, you're
So,
good.
so go ahead.
No, you're good. Yeah. So we won the school's first ever NECC championship.
Right,
We went back to back, earned 2 trips to the NCAA tournament. Um, had like I think we were at like 20 all conference players during our time
right,
there, multiple rookies of the year, multiple player of the years, multiple defensive player of the years. And really kind of built it from the ground up. I mean, they like you said, they'd never won a conference championship there before. They'd never been to the NCAA tournament. There was definitely a lot of, I don't want to use the word negative, but like
yeah,
talk of like, hey, just go there and use it as a stepping stone and then just kind of go. And
yeah,
we really, I invested a lot into that program. Our players vested a lot into that program. And we did some really special things. And I had, to be blunt, I had several offers to leave and have other head coaching jobs, and just didn't feel right. Like I just felt like we had the right people in place and we kept building
right.
together, and we could do some special things. And it ended up working out that way. And I had some great coworkers as well who are like family now, so I still keep in touch with them. But yeah, it was a really good 6 years. So
It's interesting you talk about people say it's kind of a stepping stone, just use it to get where you're going next. And here in Memphis, that's been said about our University of Memphis women's job, that we shouldn't expect great things because it's just a stepping stone for somebody to get to the next level. But you're right. When you're there, it serves you as much as the community and the students and the athletes and the university or the college to put all of it in that you can and to see what can happen because it only makes everybody else better, right?
absolutely. I couldn't agree with that more. I mean, I think too many people get their sights set on what's next, and
Yeah.
instead of kind of investing in where they are. And I think kids are smart,
Yeah.
they see that and like they can sense it. And I think our kids take a lot, our kids at Mitchell took a lot and still do take a lot of pride in the
Right.
program that we built together and the things that we did. And the records we set. And, it definitely wasn't easy, to kind of go back to what we were talking about earlier. We sold them on the process and, what it was going
Right.
to take and where we could bring the program to and what that was going to entail. And, I think we talk about kids now and just, you have instant access to everything, right? Like if you need
Right.
to have a question, you get on the internet, you need a package, Amazon will get it to you in a
I know,
day. And
right?
there's no more like waiting process. Like you used to watch TV and have to wait a whole week till you saw the next episode. Now you have
I
things
know.
on Netflix. And I think everything is so readily available and like the process sometimes gets lost. And it's like, well, if I'm really going to put all this time and energy in, what am I going to get out of it? And it's like, well, you
Right.
could get a championship. If you don't do it, you're definitely not getting a
Right.
championship. And if, people will look the outside in and say, that first championship we won, we had a very talented team. But it was a struggle behind the scenes. I mean, just I think players of like, are we actually going to get here? Why do we need to put all this work in? We had some like, big moments like as a team. We had some really bad losses. And I remember going back home after one of them and I was crying to my dad and I was like, I don't think I can do
Oh,
this. Like, I don't think we're gonna like this isn't like this is the team. We're not gonna get much better than what we have. Like we had all the right pieces, but I don't know why I can't get us like over the win. Like we were just kind of panicking. And we actually had a moment and I gave them I stole I stole a trick out of Don Staley's book and Rhode Island College had given me the whole net when we won the championship. So I had the whole net. And so I cut a piece of it off for each of them and we gave it to them. And so they
right.
had something to like feel and touch. And it was like I've been there, like I've done it. Like, and I'm telling you, if you can get over there, it's going to be one of the like best experiences that you can
Right.
ever go back on. Like, and nobody can take it away from you. Like, no one can ever take
Right.
that away from you. And it was a great turning point for us. And we turned it around and, we really crushed it in the playoffs. And, we won on the road in every round and just played to the capability that we thought we could. And then we actually played the number one team in the country in the first round of the NCAA tournament, and had them on their heels going into halftime. We were only
Right.
down like 6 and we were battling back and forth. And so, I think that gave them some motivation for the following year. And I think we had a great year overall, like that last year when we went back to back. But, they had to, fight through that process. And I think it was a huge learning experience for them for just like everything that if you really want something and something's worth it, like you're not going to get it like with the snap of your fingers. Like
Right.
there's going to be some failures in there too. And it's great learning lessons. And we learned more from our failures that year and the years prior than, winning. And so we built it was a good culture there. We had great leadership. They really kind of bonded that process. And like I said, I feel pretty fortunate now. Like they all still come up to post. So they've all been at games at post and they
I
actually,
love that.
bunch of them came up like this year. You always kind of try to like, I guess, quote unquote, streamline the process and,
Hmm.
get other players to kind of learn from your mistakes. And so 4 of my players from Mitchell came up and spoke to our team this year about like, hey, like we've been in your shoes, like, in
Yeah.
practice when coaches like this, it probably means this. And, if you guys can do these things, like you don't have to wait 4 years to get a championship. You guys can put yourself in a better position than we did. So kind of comes around like full circle. So even though we're not at Mitchell, like those players are still a part of our family. And I feel pretty fortunate that they're coming and, now being a part of our post family at the same time.
Sure.
So
No, I love that. And, looking back, do you think there is some type of plan that people can put into place when they come into a new organization, whether it is a team or a company or whatever, to kind of set that mindset to help those teammates, the players, the employees? Do you think there's a playbook or a design that someone can put in place to make that happen?
I think you can have like a blueprint, but I think every organization, university, college, team, business is so different. And, everyone's kind of got their own culture. And I
Right.
think you can lay out some groundwork of, kind of different things you want to hit on and build on. But I think it's got to be really unique to, your organization. And I think
Hmm.
that's how you create buy-in. Like, we're big on kind of building relationships. And I think if you can build relationships, not just in a team, but within a company or, wherever you're at, people feel valued. And I think you're going to
Right.
get more out of people when they feel valued and you're not just looked
I
at as an
agree.
employee, you're looked at as a person,
Right. Right.
things along those lines. But, I do think there's a ton of similarities. I think that's why, athletes do really well when they go into the workplace of, like you said earlier, learning
Hmm.
how to work within a
Yep.
team. But I think you have to build a culture wherever you are.
Sure.
And I think that's the biggest piece. And I think it'll change based on, what you're doing or the organization you're in. But, I think there's a lot of different, like, communication. What is your attitude like? Attitude
Yeah.
same in the workplace as it is here. Like, what does that kind of look like? What is, how are the relationship within your organization? I think when recruits come on campus here, we're not just like in our offices, like we know everybody around campus. So, advisors,
Mm,
professors. So, you're talking to people as you're walking athletes around, and it's like, wow, this is like a community. And I think that can be the same everywhere. And it
sure.
doesn't mean like there still needs to be the accountability piece as well. Nothing's always going to be kind of sunshine and roses, but I think there's a ton of similarities, and I think you can have a blueprint, and I think you got to get the right people in place though to kind
Right.
of structure it to be unique to, each
Right.
culture and each organization. But I think there's a lot of similarities between, kind of all of it.
I do agree about the culture. We see it as fans here in Memphis. We've seen it over the past few years how the right pieces of the puzzle weren't necessarily the right pieces of the puzzle.
Hmm.
And no matter how good someone is, not necessarily the right fit
Hmm.
for whatever reason. Ha- Going back to when you started at Mitchell versus when you started at Post, how would you just is there a difference in who you are as a coach from that first year at Mitchell to who you are at Post when you started?
Yeah, I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot. And I've adapted and adjusted. I think my core principles are the same, but I
Mm-hmm.
feel like I've definitely learned how to manage situations better. And I said it to my staff actually this year, and I'm like, it's so funny. Like, it's the same here at Post that it was at Mitchell. Like, it's the same in terms of like the process of getting the program to where we want it to be. Like, you face similar hurdles, again, maybe a little bit different kind of here and there. But I think, I made mistakes at Mitchell, and I was very fortunate to have a great athletic director who
Right.
allowed me to make those mistakes and then use them as learning experiences for me as a young head coach, where
Right.
you might not get everywhere. And, I think it really helped prepare me. At Mitchell, everyone would be, you can't be successful because you don't have the resources, or, this about the school or
Mm-hmm.
that about the school. And, we didn't really listen to those things. We just, tried to, recruit our players and, sell them on the experience. And I think we went above and beyond. And I think we had a lot of coaches in that department who did. So we got to rely on each other as well and
Right.
learn from, like, our baseball program there was very successful. They were the most successful program when I arrived, and consistently winning multiple championships. And so being able to lean on him, even though it's a different
Yeah.
sport, of, tell
Sure.
me how you got here. How did we do this? And like, all those coaches are then there supporting you when you're winning your first one. So great culture there. And then it's been able to kind of bring it over here to Post. Like, I think, like I said, the core values, we say attitude, leave your mark. And we've even had it developed. We have a weird slogan called Duck, which everybody's like, what the heck are you guys doing? And so I've learned from the failures we had at Mitchell, and I think I'm better with the kids at Post because I failed at Mitchell. Um, and so I think it's, again, similar blueprint like we were just talking about, but
Right.
each team has kind of their own way and their own path. And I'm big on, if I'm not going to get stuck in one way, if something doesn't work, we're going to find another way, to
Sure.
make it
Sure.
happen. And so, I think it's all been a learning experience. I think I'm a better coach now than I was, and I'm very fortunate to have been able to go to Mitchell because I think I had to learn a lot, I had to fail a lot, I had to find different avenues, and not make any sort of excuses. And so I think I was well prepared
Right.
coming in here. So some of the things that maybe other coaches feel like we don't have, or things, and it's like, well, we got a lot more than I had previously, and we did pretty well there. So it just gives you kind of a different mindset and a different outlook as you kind of go and build.
Sure. What was the biggest mistake? I'm going to put ask you biggest mistake you made at Mitchell.
I would say not listening, being very much like, this is how we're doing things, this is how we're going to do it. And kind of, I would say the best terminology would be like not taking a deep breath and like letting it sink in and then finding, a solution. So it's like, my way or the highway, this is how it's going to go, this is how we're going to do it. And not to say that, we don't have that standard here now, but I think there are ways where we didn't have to create as much like ruffling of feathers or
Right.
drama and things along those lines. Like, I still think we could ultimately achieve the right goal and get where we want to be and what we want to do. But I think I could have listened a little more, versus kind of, I would say probably a little bit of lack of confidence, a little bit of like, you don't
Yeah.
want the kids to look at you a certain way, especially as a young coach, being, they don't know what they're doing or this and that. And so you're trying to kind of lay it down where I'm young, but I'm in charge. This is what
Right.
we're doing. This is how we're doing it. I think there were better ways, and we could have got to the same result without having as many hurdles if I could have handled some situations better, or, been able to kind of listen versus just listening to respond.
No, I get that absolutely. It looking back on everything, was there a point where you had a hard time like leaving the part of the athlete in you? Because I've talked to a lot of people, and in a lot of the conversations they talk about, even after they made the decision whether or not it was theirs, or an injury or something like that, was there ever a hard part about leaving the player in you behind and not playing the sport anymore?
Not too bad, honestly. I made that choice because I had the opportunity to go
Sure.
overseas and continue to play if I wanted to. I had some things set up, and then chose that coaching path.
Right.
Um, but I think, like, when you talk to my players, like, I'm very passionate about the game. I was that way as a player, and I think it shows in my coaching as well. So, I not too much for me of like a hard time in that transition. I was more on the edge of, just because I was so young. Like, I think I was 20. Like, I went to college when I was 17, so I was young,
Oh,
and then so
yeah.
like turned 18 right as the start of it. And so I was always kind of like the younger one, and then getting into that full-time assistant job, I was like 22 years old. I was the youngest assistant in the country at
Wow.
coaching too. So it was like, you got to, like, really, I wanted to make sure I found that balance of, still being the assistant, but not being like their friend slash teammate.
Right.
That was, trying to make sure that I was still, like, quote unquote, an authority figure and not just like their buddy. And kind of make sure I could gain the respect that way. But I think because of my playing experience and us having success, from a skill development standpoint, I was able to
Mhm.
gain a lot of credibility that way with those players at a young age, of being able to help and develop them.
Yeah.
Um, to kind of bridge that gap between, again, I think my first year when I was coaching at Southern Connecticut, like, one of the players on the team was actually older than me. So I'm like, oh, this is weird. But, like I said, I had some great mentors. And so, I always say, like, coaching a bad day coaching basketball is better than most people's good days in some of their jobs. So
Yeah.
it's like, I feel pretty fortunate that I was able to kind of do what I love and, take it to the next level. And like I said, my college coach has been a huge mentor for me, still is. I just talked to him
Right.
yesterday. So, kind of how I need to handle the process and things along those lines. So.
So, when you have a player come to you that maybe she's unsure of herself or unsure of parts of her game, how do you help her work through that?
Yeah, that's great. So I have an open door policy, which is kind of funny now because we have cubicles. So I've always had an office. We have cubicles. Like, my door is like
Cubicles?
literally always open. Like, there's not even a door anymore.
Oh my
But we
God.
kind of tell them that. So, and like I said, we build that relationship in the recruiting process. So, like, we're very strategic of, we've had some really talented players that just aren't the right fit, and we haven't
Right.
offered for them to come here. So that's a big part of it, of kind of building that relationship, and that trust. And like I said, I'm very transparent. So, like, we talk a lot about our players, like, roles, expectations, where we see them. And then, freshman year, I think for anybody is tough. And then after that freshman year, we do skill books. And so basically, like, we split up everybody on our team amongst our staff, and we pick 3 to 4 things we want each player to work on. And then we
Right.
really break it down in detail of what that looks like. So, we say we want you to be an elite shooter. What does that look like for you? What does that look like for us? And so we label that out. And then there's a lot of stats and a lot of graphs and pictures and things behind of, what does that look like? So every time you step to the right, when you shot 12%, but every time you stepped into the shot, you shot 65%.
Oh,
And so, we took it to a little bit of another level where they're very detailed. We signed 7 Division I transfers last summer, and they
wow.
yeah, we had a good year, and
You had a great year.
yeah, it went well, so I can't complain there. But yeah, I mean, they all came from some really good programs with some terrific coaches, and who have done a really nice job. And, we gave them those books, and they're like, we've never seen this in this much detail. It was more just kind of like general. And
Right.
then just, we're very much available. You can usually sense, like, when a kid's doing well or not doing well, especially mentally.
Hmm.
And it's a lot of, honestly, conversations that are just kind of more relaxed. Like, let's go grab lunch. Like, how are you
Yeah.
doing? What's going on? And again, like, I think we had 13 new kids on our roster last year. And I think now we've kind of broken through and really like built that relationship with them where they feel like they can trust you and come have that conversation. They know they're going to get kind of the real truth of what we're
Right.
looking at, but also like, I think we know as a staff, and again, with us being together for so long, of like, all right, it's probably best for me to talk to this kid. It's probably best for John to talk to this kid
Yeah.
right now. And so my assistants do a great job. So like I said, I'm very fortunate for them. But I think we've built those relationships so the kids feel comfortable. Like, okay, if I tell her I'm not doing well at this or I want help with this, like, we'll watch film, we'll get in the gym. Sometimes it's talking. So I think it kind of depends on the player and the situation. But I think, our kids right now, like they know exactly if they want what they want their role to be, they know what they have to do. They know what the
Mhm.
expectations are. It's very much laid out. And then, I like our kids to ask questions. Like when we're
Yeah.
playing, running through
Yeah.
our offense, like our practices are very up tempo. Like kids, like recruits come, we always want them to see a practice. Coaches, like,
Right.
with us struggling at the beginning part of the year, like we were still having really great practices, which was like frustrating. But you get people coming in and like, wow, like your team goes hard. Like, they do this. And then, I think creating that leadership as well, like we talked about earlier. I was just saying to our recruits this morning, we got cleaned out the locker room today, and one of our transfers was having like a tough time in the middle of the year. And I was cleaning out kind of the pieces, and there was a piece of paper she left, and it was from one of the seniors being like, hey, it was a tough practice, but like you got the next one, like a little note. And it's like, all
Oh,
right, like they get it. Like they get it.
yeah.
I mean, so like they have each other's backs too. So
I love that. I love that when, they take what you do and then they can help each other
yeah.
just as much. So you do a couple of things outside of coaching at Post. You have Burns Elite Training. Why
Yes.
why did you start that and what is that about?
Yeah, so it's actually a funny story, and it's actually going to get bigger as of tomorrow, so or maybe even 5 o'clock today. So,
Oh,
um,
this is breaking news.
yeah, it is. You're going to be the first one to know. Yeah. So when I was at Mitchell, with coaching, like salaries aren't big, and I had a couple
Yeah.
of kids that had asked me to do some training on the side, and I was looking at a buddy of mine does like websites and things like that, and I'm not big on, I don't like talking about myself, to be honest with
A
you.
lot of
Or
people
like
don't.
talking about my team and those things
Yeah.
versus like trying to sell myself. So a buddy of mine who runs a very successful video company had said, why don't we just try to create like basically like a virtual resume for you where like it's out there. And
Yeah.
it was great. Like my dad helped me, and then that guy helped me out a lot too. And they came in, they like interviewed our players, and they, like did some stuff on the school. We talked about our culture. And he like took a bunch of videos. And then a couple months later, I'd followed up with him and just trying to see where the website was at. He's like, why don't you come into the office? And so I came in and we talked, and he's like, what are your goals? And it was like, I was at Mitchell, and I was like, I want to continue to build here. And, Division 2 would be a lovely step, like a next step if I could
Right.
get there. Like, I just like that model. I said, but, when it comes, it'll come, and we'll kind of see. And, maybe one day Division 1, I don't know. And so see where everything kind of falls. And he was like, well, I have an idea. Like, I think you should make this like into like a training company where you're like training kids like in youth and develop them, and listen to the things that your player said. And so I was like, I don't know. And he's like, well, let's just like give it a try. And so like we partnered and launched, and he did me a whole website and a logo, and then literally we did our first like intro clinic, and then I got the job at Post like 6 months later. So I
Wow.
kind of like uprooted a little bit, and we stopped
Mhm.
stopped doing some stuff. I still live in the area near Mitchell. Like I'm a couple towns over, so I got a little bit of commute into work. And one of the young ladies that I had trained for like 3 years, her mom works at a local high school, and was like, well, would you consider moving your training to this high school? And so I was like, sure. And so
Yeah.
we started training like youth kids all the way up to like high school, college, even professional level. And it was going okay. Very kind of sporadic. Like some days I'd show up and we'd have nobody. Some days I'd show
Right.
up and we'd have like 4 or 5. And what I would do was when I was in season, I would stop. So I'd go for
Yeah.
like a 6 week session and then stop and then try to set it back up. And then I signed a contract with that high school, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to do this year round. So every Sunday, 12 to 1:30,
Wow.
offer the training session. I'm going to do it in season, see where we can
Right.
go. And we're up to like 10 or 12 now in there, like pretty consistently.
Right.
With the high schoolers on break now, like we get more in the gym. And then I've like worked with a lot of younger kids and been able to kind of see them develop and grow. And one of the dads a couple weeks ago said to me, I think you should coach Scarlett's AAU team. And I was like, oof, I'm like, I love you guys, but like I've done the AAU. And they're like, well, we're just like looking for a new experience. Like, we think you should do it. And I was like, yeah, and like at Division 2, you weren't allowed to, and then they
Right.
actually just changed the rules this year. So now you
Oh,
can. And so yeah, so 2 days later, a young lady that I coached like my first summer of coaching a camp and kind of helped her through her recruiting process reached out to me and was like, when are we going to make Burns Elite bigger than what it is? And I was like, haha. She's like, no, I'm serious. And I was like, well, I've already talked to your boss and I'm not coaching 6 AAU teams. Like, I don't want to do that.
right.
And they're like,
Yeah.
well, we just jump on a call. I'm like, okay. So I was like, I'll jump on the call. You never know. So I jumped on the call and now we're going to have, I'm going to be the regional director for Burns Elite AAU, which is going to start this fall. And so I won't actually be coaching the teams, but I'll be like the skill development guy. So like they'll still get the
Yeah.
development and then
Yeah.
talk to some of my staff and going to get them some kind of on-court experience of them being able to run their team. But trying to get back to kind of the development of youth and try
Yes.
to give them a different
Yes.
experience. And I said to them, kind of make the same culture with that AAU program that we had at Mitchell and we have now here
Yeah.
at Post and kind of trying to build it that way. And so, yeah, so that's launching tonight. That'll be on there
That
tonight.
is
So,
awesome.
yeah, thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
The other thing that I read was that you are co-director of the Nike girls basketball camp.
Hmm.
Is that the EYBL circuit?
No, so it's just so it's like USS Sport Camps,
Okay.
and they're basically sponsored by Nike. So a buddy of mine, like 7 years ago now, we used to work camp at Sacred Heart, and they
Yeah.
utilized them, and so we partnered with them and started our overnight camp, and so we've built it up. We sell out pretty much every summer, but we get all college coaches to work it, so
Sure.
they get like a college experience there, and yeah, we run it
And
at
making the
water. So
connections too with the
exactly, like
yes.
we were saying, it's so funny now, like a lot of the kids that were been at camp when they were young are now like going to college and
Yeah.
you're seeing them on the AAU circuit and things like that. So yeah, so that's gone pretty well. So
I think that's a great grassroots growth program to start feeding wherever you're coaching at, to start feeding the younger players into your college or university wherever you're coaching at. I think that's a great feeder, and it also develops them. It's a win-win situation for everybody, I believe.
I
Um,
think so.
I hope so too.
Yeah.
I'm excited about that. So let's go back. When you think about your 9-year-old self, if you could go back and talk to 9-year-old Courtney, what advice would you give her?
Oof, that's a great question. I don't know if I've ever been asked that one before. Hmm. I would say trust the process.
Okay.
Trust the process. I think everybody kind of has their own journey. My
Yes.
biggest fault, and I think it's a strength as well, is I'm very impatient. So like when I want something, I want it and I'll keep working to get it done.
Right.
But I'm a big believer now, like everything for a reason. There were a
Yes.
lot of jobs that, I applied for at the Division 2 level that I got passed up for. And to be honest, like Post is the perfect fit for me.
Yeah.
You look back at it now and it's like you're so disappointed in certain situations, or you're disappointed in your dream school when you originally look and it's like, well, I didn't even know Rhode Island College existed, and then you
Yeah.
went there and it's like, your life could have been totally different if you're doing something else. So I would say, continue to work hard, continue to put the effort in, make sure you're focused on the details, but don't always be so disappointed if it didn't work out the way you thought it should, because it's probably a better path.
Sure. Okay. Where can people find you on social media?
So my social media hands are all Coach C Burns. So
Okay.
pretty easy kind of across the board. And then our post handles are post_WBB.
Okay.
And then for the training stuff, it's Burns_elite.
I'll put all of those in the show notes and on the video when it comes out on YouTube. Okay, just a few quick flash fire fun questions.
Okay.
What's your game day ritual or superstition that you still hold on to?
Ooh, I'm a coffee every morning.
Yes.
Coffee during shoot around. And then as a player, I've always listened to Eminem till I collapse. Every game in high school, every game in college, every every game as a coach. So
That's crazy. Okay, and if you could coach alongside anyone, living or dead, who would you pick and why?
Oh, that's a tough one. It's like really hard between Pat Summitt and Gino Auriemma, to be honest. I'd
Mm,
probably throw Jay Wright in there a little bit as well, but I think I would go. I think I'd probably go Pat Summitt. I feel like
okay.
she started to change the game, and then
Yeah.
before she kind of got sick and everything went down, her and Gino were kind of going toe to
Right.
toe. But I think she grew up in a small town, similar, didn't
Yeah.
realize kind of coaching could be a thing. She went into it, kind of her struggles. I think you could learn a lot from the empire she built at Tennessee.
Yes. I'm not a UT fan. I'm obviously in Memphis,
Yeah,
but I respect the hell out of her. I think she
oh,
was an amazing coach. Our current coach for our women's team, Alex Simmons, she played on her team. She
it's
played for
amazing.
her. So yeah, I just think she's an amazing individual, if nothing else. Before
Changed the
everything else.
game.
Yeah, she did. Okay, favorite game, meal, or snack? Post game. Sorry, post game
Post
meal or snack.
game,
Yeah.
chicken wings.
Yes.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
A quote or motto you say to your team often,
Duck.
and you're going to say what that means.
Yes. So when it's a little bit of a story on this one, so it might take me a minute.
Okay.
When I was at Mitchell, the first year we were winning the chip, we were trying to go for the first championship. Like I said, we weren't doing well, and I was very frustrated trying to kind of figure it out. And I went into the office, and our lacrosse coach, his office was right next to mine, and like you could visibly tell I was frustrated. And he said, "Coach, be a duck." And I like got mad. I'm like, I don't know what that means. Like, and I'm like annoyed. Like, what does that mean? He's like, be a duck. Have you ever seen a duck in the water? And I was like, I still don't know what you're talking about. He's like, watch. He's like, the water just rolls off of them. He's like, you got to just let it
Oh,
roll off.
yeah.
And so the next day I came to the office and there was a giant picture of a duck with the water like rolling off the back. And so we talked to our team right before we went into our big conference rivals, NEC. And, we said it's going to be chaotic in here. We're going to make mistakes. I'm going to make mistakes. But how are we going to bounce back? We just got to let it roll off. So we'd go like this
Yeah.
and signal that. And this year, our team really struggled. We were young and just if they made a mistake, like we couldn't get over it. Like, and it spiraled into this one and that one and this one and that one. And so, this team was really big on like, quick little things. Like when we do traps in the corner, we call them mouse. So we don't want to call out traps. So we call it like a mouse trap. So we go mouse, 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 mouse. So
Right.
they really bought into that. And so I called my assistant on the way up here and I was like, do you think the duck story can work again? Like, do you think it can work again? And they ate it up. They love it. And so when things started to look like they were going to spiral, we would say duck, 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 and then they would clap twice and they would say duck, duck, and they'd clap. And it was a mental
Oh,
reset for us to just
right.
kind of like let it roll off like it
Sure.
already happened.
Sure.
And so,
Sure.
yeah, long story for that one. But yes,
I
that is
love
our kids
that.
love it. My grandmother bought them all rubber ducks. Some of them are putting them in their shoes. They're all over the locker room. They're like they eat it up. And so yeah, when things go wrong, like I think one of them said like something went wrong in the classroom and they said duck and everybody was like staring at them. I'm like, okay.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, last thing. If you weren't coaching, what would you be doing?
I can't even answer that one. So many people have asked me that. I don't, it's something with basketball, I guess. I don't know. And
Yeah.
people say that all the time. I guess teaching, I'd probably go back to
Right.
teaching, but
Right.
yeah, no, that's a hard one. People have asked me that and they're like, oh, at what point do you think? I'm like, no, I'll probably just do this forever. So
Okay, and there you have it. That's it. That wraps up today's show. Courtney, thank you so much for being my guest today. I reached out. I didn't talk about this at the beginning, but I literally just I go on LinkedIn and I search former athlete or student athlete or something like that, and you popped up, and I kind of quickly just scanned your thing and went and Googled you, and I was like, this is a really interesting story. I'd love to have you on. Reached out to you, you responded, and here we are, and I appreciate you just saying yes and going for it.
yeah, no,
Um,
we appreciate it.
so for all of you out there watching and listening, especially if you've made it all the way to this part of the show, I appreciate all your support. Another reminder to subscribe to the show wherever you listen or watch. My mantra is like, share, and review. Follow us on social media at 5THQRT Podcast. Until next time, remember, change is our ally and it paves the way for greatness. Stay inspired. Have a great rest of the week.